The black mayor is getting national attention for the way that she's spending taxpayer dollars. But she's now accused of spending tens of thousands of taxpayer funds on self-promoting billboards, as well as putting her name on government buildings.
Government did get in our public building to have meetings. Why are meetings being canceled? Why can't we have transparency?
The situation surrounding Tiffany Henyard in Dalton has spiraled out of control as town trustees intensify their pursuit of her following serious allegations of financial misconduct. Accused of embezzling funds meant to improve the community, Henyard allegedly misused taxpayer money for personal gain, prompting the FBI to freeze her bank accounts and prepare to seize her assets. Reports suggest she spent public funds on a lavish security team, prioritizing her protection over community safety, as well as on self-promotional billboards that serve no real purpose. Additionally, her extravagant personal shopping habits reportedly drained thousands of dollars daily from town funds, leaving residents outraged and questioning her priorities. The mounting evidence has shocked the community, leading to federal investigators joining the case as Dalton's trustees remain determined to seek justice. The scandal has not only exposed significant financial mismanagement, but has also raised concerns about how such misconduct went undetected for so long. Now, as the town faces the long road to rebuilding trust in its leadership, residents are left grappling with the profound betrayal and wondering if integrity in governance can ever be restored.
Tiffany Henyard calendar, which includes the super mayor's birthday, because you can't forget that. She could be proud of this result, given that her salary for the two jobs is nearly $300,000. More than the state's governor, by the way. But it's all on the taxpayer side. And this goes beyond signage and merch. Henyard put an ordinance in place that if she lost a future mayoral election, the next mayor's salary would be dropped from $200,000 to $25,000. But if she wins...
Many in Dalton suspect that Tiffany Henyard's ability to evade justice for so long and the fact that she has yet to be arrested is due to the potential complicity of certain members of the town's Board of Trustees. Rumors have been circulating that some of the trustees who were once seen as working independently to uncover the truth may themselves be entangled in the corruption. This raises the unsettling possibility that the problem extends far beyond Henyard alone. Whispers suggest that some trustees were not only aware of her actions, but may have even benefited from them, possibly being involved in the mismanagement and misappropriation of public funds. Of growing suspicion is that the effort to pursue Henyard is now partly a strategy to protect the broader network of corruption that could be exposed if she fully reveals what she knows. As the situation escalates, Henyard has spent weeks defending herself at town meetings, attempting to maintain her position and deny the allegations. However, the evidence mounting against her is becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Despite her protest of innocence, the weight of the accusation seems to be catching up with her, and fewer people in Dalton are willing to take her side. To the trustees, who have long been investigating Henyard's financial dealings, have faced their own difficulties in bringing her to justice. Initially, they attempted to conduct a covert inquiry into her finances by requesting her financial records, hoping to uncover the full extent of her mismanagement. However, Henyard reportedly made it exceedingly difficult for them to access these records, throwing up numerous obstacles and using her power and influence to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. In some instances, it's been alleged that Henyard even tampered with evidence, potentially destroying or altering documents to protect herself and derail the investigation. Her ability to manipulate people and obstruct the inquiry has only fueled suspicions that she has powerful allies in the town's leadership who are eager to keep her in power for their own benefit. This has left many wondering just how deep the corruption runs and who else might be involved. As the pressure on Henyard mounts, it seems that the trustees are now starting to distance themselves from her, possibly in an attempt to shield Elle from the growing scandal. However, this shyiness only adds to the sense that the corruption may be far more widespread than initially thought. What began as a seemingly isolated issue of alleged financial mismanagement has now exploded into a full-blown scandal involving potential cover-ups, abuse of power, and a web of deceit spreading across the town's leadership. With each passing day, the situation grows more chaotic. The public is demanding answers while Henyard desperately clings to her innocence and position. The trust of the people has been severely damaged, and many are questioning the integrity of the very officials who are supposed to safeguard the town's well-being. The increasing uncertainty and turmoil suggests that what happens next is far from clear. One thing, however, is becoming evident: the community of Dalton is on the verge of a reckoning, and the truth about what has been happening behind closed doors will soon come to light. Whether Henyard and the trustees wanted to or not, the ongoing investigation and the tense political climate make it clear that the situation is far from resolved. Dalton faces a long road ahead in restoring order and rebuilding any semblance of trust in its leadership. The scandals unfolding has cast a shadow over the town's future, with residents now anxiously awaiting answers as they grapple with the betrayal of those they
intimidation tank. And Dalton has less than 30 police officers. But that room, I only saw two police officers. But presumably, whoever was holding the camera is a police officer as well. So
the people of Dalton had finally reached their breaking point, with Tiffany Henyard's ongoing efforts to obstruct the investigation into her corrupt practices. After months of frustration, they turned to Lori Lightfoot, the former mayor of Chicago, to take control of the situation. Known for her strong leadership and investigative skills, Lightfoot wasted no time in delving into the case. It did not take long before a vast trove of damning evidence surfaced, implicating Henyard in a wide range of illegal activities. The findings were so alarming that it became clear Henyard was facing serious jail time. Yet, despite the mounting evidence, she remained free, protected by a network of powerful allies who continued to shield her from justice. When Lightfoot assumed her role as the special investigator, the full scale of Henyard's criminal behavior was suddenly brought into the light. What had initially been suspected as a case of financial mismanagement soon morphed into something far darker and more sinister. Henyard's actions were not only illegal but also wreaking havoc on the lives of Dalton's residents. One of the most significant discoveries Lightfoot made was the rapid decline in the town's general fund. When the investigation began, Dalton's general fund had a balance of $5.6 million, a sum that should have been more than sufficient to meet the needs of the community. However, by May 2024, that amount had plummeted to just $3.65 million, representing a staggering loss of nearly $2 million. This drastic financial decline served as a foundation for the deeper inquiry into Henyard's activities, but it was far from the only shocking revelation. Lightfoot soon uncovered a series of detailed credit card transactions, each one pointing directly to Henyard's irresponsible and selfish spending habits. These transactions were linked to a credit card tied to Dalton's public funds, and it appeared that Henyard frequently indulged in extravagant online shopping sprees whenever she was bored. Instead of using the town's money for its intended purposes, Henyard was using it to fund her own lavish lifestyle. Among the numerous purchases, one stood out as particularly egregious. On January 5, 2023, Henyard spent a jaw-dropping $33,000 on Amazon, buying an assortment of goods that seemed completely unrelated to the needs of Dalton. But the extravagance did not stop there. Two additional purchases were made on the same day, one for $4,753, and another from Wayfair for nearly $7,000. On top of that, Henyard racked up $2,200 at Best Buy and an astounding $12,988 on international vacations. The scale of the spending was beyond belief. It was clear that Henyard had no regard for the financial welfare of Dalton, using its funds in a way that bordered on outright theft. Her behavior was not just irresponsible, it was reckless with the very funds that should have been used to improve the town and support its struggling residents. The fact that such huge sums of money were being spent so frivolously by someone entrusted with managing public funds left many in Dalton speechless. While the people in the community struggled to make ends meet, Henyard was living a life of luxury, paying no heed to the suffering around her. Lightfoot's investigation uncovered not only the massive scale of Henyard's spending spree, but also the profound and detrimental effects her actions had on Dalton's finances. The people who should have benefited from these funds were barely able to survive, while Henyard seemed to operate as though the money was endless. The idea that someone could spend public funds so carelessly and recklessly without any concern for the well-being of those who depended on it was deeply disturbing. The investigation also raised serious questions about how Henyard had been able to maintain her position of power for so long, especially with so many warning signs and red flags surrounding her activities. How was she able to manipulate the system and avoid accountability for her actions? The answer began to emerge as Lightfoot's investigation revealed the extent of Henyard's alliances within Dalton's leadership. The fact that she had strong allies, possibly even among the trustees, helped explain why she had been able to operate with relative impunity for so long. These allies were likely complicit in the corruption, ensuring that Henyard was shielded from the consequences of her behavior. Despite the mounting evidence and growing outrage from the residents of Dalton, Henyard remained free, and many were left to wonder how long she would continue to evade justice. While Lightfoot's efforts had certainly uncovered a mountain of evidence, the fact that Henyard was still protected by powerful forces only added to the frustration and distrust felt by the people of Dalton. What was clear, however, was that the full scope of Henyard's criminal behavior had now been exposed. It was only a matter of time before the truth caught up with her. As the investigation continued, shocking new revelations came to light, further compounding the damage caused by Henyard's actions. Tiffany's lavish lifestyle and reckless spending habits continued to shock the people of Dalton, who were facing severe financial hardship due to her egregious misuse of public funds. While the residents of Dalton struggled to make ends meet, Tiffany was indulging in extravagant shopping sprees, vacations, and personal luxuries, all funded by the very money that was supposed to support the community. But the financial damage she caused was not even the worst of it. The community was stunned to learn that as of June 18, 2024, at least 589 checks totaling more than $6 million had been authorized and printed, but never delivered to the vendors they were intended for. These vendors, who had been waiting for payment for goods and services rendered to the town, were left in the dark as Tiffany arrogantly retained the money for herself, diverting it to finance her personal indulgences. This was a massive breach of trust and an absolute betrayal of the very people she was supposed to serve. The shockwaves from this revelation rippled through the community, leaving residents feeling betrayed and helpless. The investigation did not stop there. Another deeply troubling revelation surfaced. Two police officers, believed to be employed by Tiffany, had been receiving overtime compensation that far exceeded their regular salaries. One officer, who had earned $87,200 in base pay for the fiscal year 2024, somehow managed to rack up an additional $114,800 in overtime compensation, a staggering amount that seemed utterly disproportionate to their role. Another officer, whose salary was listed at $73,500, had somehow received an astounding $112,238 in overtime pay during the same period. This raised even more questions about the scope of Tiffany's manipulation of the system and her apparent disregard for the integrity of public service. These excessive payouts suggested that Tiffany was not only misappropriating public funds, but was also using her power to distort the town's resources for personal gain. She had allowed certain individuals to benefit unjustly while the rest of Dalton suffered. The entire situation was riddled with deceit, greed, and corruption. Tiffany's actions were not merely the result of financial mismanagement, they went beyond reckless behavior. They were a direct attack on the core of the community she was supposed to protect. The people of Dalton had entrusted her with their tax dollars, believing she would use the funds to improve the town and serve its residents. Yet she had turned that trust into an opportunity for self-enrichment. The revelation of her spending habits and the depth of her financial misconduct left the town in disbelief. The sheer scale of her wrongdoing was almost unimaginable, and the community was left grappling with the devastating impact of her actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, Tiffany remained free, shielded by powerful allies who continued to protect her from facing the consequences of her actions. The frustration among Dalton's residents was palpable as they wondered how long she would continue to evade justice. They knew full well that every day she remained free only deepened the injustice they had suffered. While Tiffany's supporters continued to shield her, the residents of Dalton were resolute in their demand for justice. The truth was undeniable. Tiffany Henyard's actions had caused irreparable harm to the town, and there could be no excuse for the damage she had done to its people. The financial ruin, the betrayal of trust, and the abuse of power were beyond comprehension. The community was united in their call for accountability, and the question now was how much longer Tiffany would be able to avoid the consequences of her actions. It was clear that despite the protection she enjoyed from those in positions of authority, the residents of Dalton had reached their breaking point. They had had enough of her mismanagement, her greed, and her manipulation of the town's resources. They would not rest until justice was served and the full extent of Tiffany's corruption was revealed to the world. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but one thing was certain: the people of Dalton were determined to see that justice was done.
Thousands of dollars on a week-long walk to promote her self-named cancer charity, which has yet to file required reporting. She spent almost $15,000 for a trip to Vegas, as well as shooting music videos like this awesome one with fellow.
The full scope of Tiffany Henyard's financial misconduct stunned the residents of Dalton, leaving them in a state of disbelief. The betrayal they felt was palpable, as they had entrusted her with their hard-earned tax dollars, only to discover she had used those funds to fuel her own lavish and reckless lifestyle. Outrage boiled over, and a trustee of Dalton was even interviewed by Fox News, expressing deep frustration and demanding swift prosecution. "I suspected all along that Tiffany needs to be locked up and made an example of," the trustee said, his voice thick with anger. "She cannot just go free. The federal authorities are not letting Tiffany get away with using our money and spending it however she pleases, as if her job included a cash register." The community was adamant they wanted justice. They expected federal authorities to make an example out of Henyard, showing that corruption would not be tolerated, no matter who was involved. As the Board of Trustees continued to grapple with the fallout of Henyard's actions, things appeared to be heating up for her. Tiffany was recently served with 2 separate subpoenas, signaling that authorities were closing in. These subpoenas represented an expanding investigation, and many interpreted them as a sign that the noose was tightening around her neck. The FBI moved swiftly, freezing Tiffany's bank accounts and taking steps to seize assets, a move that suggested they were preparing for a major arrest. In the second subpoena, the federal government demanded a wide range of documents, including personnel files, wage and tax records, time and attendance logs, contracts, checks written to cashed, and records related to Henyard's numerous business ventures. These ventures were extensive, including a restaurant, a property management company, a charity under her name, and even a political action committee. The authorities were seeking a comprehensive financial trail, covering payroll records, budgets, ordinances related to credit card purchases, expense reports, reimbursements, security information, and vehicle usage records. The scope of the investigation was staggering. What federal investigators uncovered was a trove of incriminating evidence pointing directly to Henyard's abuse of power, her misuse of public funds, and her personal enrichment at the expense of Dalton's residents. Despite the overwhelming evidence, however, Tiffany had not yet been arrested. Many speculated that her powerful and influential allies were using their influence to shield her from the law. These connections seemed to be delaying her downfall, but federal authorities were not blind to this. It became clear that they were determined to ensure they had a solid, indisputable case before making any arrests, which explained the strategic delay and the issuance of 2 subpoenas. Law enforcement was methodical in their pursuit of justice, wanting to gather every relevant piece of evidence to ensure Tiffany could not claim the investigation was flawed or that she could evade facing consequences. The fact that she had been served with 2 subpoenas spoke to the breadth of the investigation. Authorities were leaving no stone unturned, covering all angles before making a move. As the days passed, it was becoming increasingly clear that the FBI and federal investigators were determined to follow the legal process to the letter, ensuring that when Tiffany was arrested, the case would be airtight and solid enough to guarantee a conviction. For the residents of Dalton, the growing realization that justice was moving slowly but surely in their favor was bittersweet. They had waited long enough to see Tiffany held accountable for her actions. While it was frustrating to see her continue walking free for the time being, the evidence against her was so overwhelming that there was little doubt she would eventually face consequences. The community's faith in the justice system was being tested, but residents found hope knowing that authorities were being careful and thorough. The overwhelming evidence left no doubt that justice would eventually be served. In the meantime, the residents of Dalton anxiously awaited the moment when Tiffany Henyard would no longer be able to hide behind her powerful connections. The day when she would be forced to answer for the damage she had caused to their town could not come soon enough. A recent meeting of Dalton's Board of Trustees revealed a shocking development. They had authorized a credit card spending freeze in light of the ongoing federal investigation into Tiffany Henyard's financial misconduct. This decision sent shockwaves through the community, and Tiffany's reaction was nothing short of enraged. Upon learning of the freeze, she became irate and attempted to persuade the board to lift the restriction. Tiffany argued that the freeze wasn't just an effort to stop her. It was a move to halt all essential services in the community. You thought it was just a way to stop Tiffany Henyard, she argued, but it's a way to basically stop the services here in Dalton Township. Her transparent attempt to deflect attention from her wrongdoing did not go unnoticed. Many residents and officials saw through her words. This was the same woman who had used taxpayer money to fund lavish vacations, spent $443,000 on Amazon in a single day, paid police officers excessive overtime, and squandered millions of dollars on personal security while Dalton's residents struggled. Now, after being exposed for her extravagant misuse of public funds, she suddenly claimed to be concerned about the town's services. This contradiction left many incredulous. How could someone who had shown such blatant disregard for Dalton's well-being now suddenly care about the services he had effectively crippled with her greed? Tiffany had failed to consider the needs of Dalton's residents when she decided to steal from them. Instead of reinvesting the town's money into improving the community, she used it for her own personal gain. Now that her personal bank accounts and the town's finances were being locked down, Tiffany had no choice but to face the consequences of her actions. The federal investigation revealed that the millions of dollars sitting in her accounts were never meant to be hers. Dalton's residents were determined to get that money back. The financial damage Tiffany had caused was staggering, and for the first time, the town was beginning to see hope that justice might prevail. Opinions within the community were divided on the best course of action. Some residents went so far as to call for the disbanding of the police department, which had been manipulated by Tiffany during her time in office. Others argued that beyond the prison sentence Tiffany was facing, she must also be held accountable by reimbursing all of the public and municipal funds she had unlawfully used for her own benefit. The anger within Dalton was palpable. Many felt betrayed by someone they had trusted to manage the town's resources. Tiffany's personal misconduct had not only harmed the financial stability of Dalton, but it had also undermined the integrity of local institutions. The fact that the community had to resort to a credit card spending freeze to prevent further damage only highlighted the scale of her deceit. As for Tiffany's fate, the overwhelming sentiment among Dalton's residents was that she should be held fully accountable for her actions. This accountability would require both criminal prosecution and reimbursement of the stolen funds. Her actions were seen as a betrayal of public trust, and many felt that only the harshest punishment would suffice. The idea of her accounts being frozen and her assets seized was seen as a necessary step to prevent her from benefiting further from her crimes. This would also ensure that she faced the consequences of her lavish spending spree, funded by stolen taxpayer money. The question now on everyone's mind was whether Tiffany would continue to evade justice for much longer, or if the federal authorities would move quickly to ensure she could no longer exploit her position of power. The clock was ticking, and Dalton's residents anxiously awaited the day when Tiffany Henyard would finally be held fully accountable for her actions. Many believed that not only should she face time in prison, but her assets should also be taken away to pay back the harm she had caused. There was no sympathy left for Tiffany, especially given the vast amounts of money she had squandered while the people of Dalton suffered. The town's residents now believed that she should have no say in how the situation was handled. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. For many, the only way forward was to ensure Tiffany faced the full consequences of her greed and corruption. The road to accountability might be long, but the people of Dalton were resolute in their pursuit of justice. Tiffany Henyard's reign of misuse was over, and the only question now was how much longer she could evade the inevitable reckoning.